Welcome, everyone. My name is Jamil Modaffari. I serve as the league's policy specialist, and thanks for joining us today for a practical discussion on how to get kids biking in schools. As many of you may know, the league has been teaching cycling education and certifying instructors for over 50 years, and we're excited to continue this important work in pursuit of a future where all children are ready to ride. And today, we have an outstanding panel of cycling education experts who will each present on their school-based cycling program, provide insights into the policies, funding sources, and practical elements. In addition, there'll be plenty of time for audience Q&A, so please submit your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. It is my hope you walk away from this webinar with a few tools, resources, and connections you can use in your current school-based cycling education program or to start one. So let's jump into introductions. I'll kick things off and then pass it to my awesome panelists. Can you please share your name, pronouns, role, and org, as well as briefly share your earliest cycling memory? And so, as I said at the beginning, my name is Jamil Modaffari. You see their pronouns, and I am a policy specialist with the league. In my earliest cycling memory, I'm not sure how old I was, just a little tot, scooting around on my Fisher Price trike, trying to catch my dog. And with that, I'll pass it to Travis.
Aloha, my name is Travis Counsell. I'm the executive director of the Hawai'i Bicycling League, he, him pronouns. My earliest bicycling memory must have been daycare. They had this great grassy slope, and we would try to see who could go the longest at the bottom, just coasting down and learning how to ride a bike. So definitely a fun time. I'll pass it over to Kristin.
Hello, my name is Kristin Donley. I work for Alexandria City Public Schools. Oh, I'm sorry, my pronouns are she, her. And I oversee health, physical education, and family life instruction for Alexandria City Public Schools grades K through 10. And my earliest cycling memory, I made it on the front page of our local newspaper when the helmet law was passed. And so I had, this massive styrofoam egg helmet on my head, and my friends made a lot of fun of me, but I'm glad to see that the image stuck. And I'm going to pass it to Angela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Olson, she, her, and I'm the deputy director and the education director at the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Oh gosh, my first biking memory, I think, is trying to learn. I had some kind of purpley pink Huffy bike, but I had one training wheel, and we lived at the top of the hill, and the driveway split around a tree, and so that was my practice areas. I would just do circles around the tree, and I think that's probably my first memory. And I think that's all the panelists. Or no, Stephen.
Hey guys, Stephen Rowley, education director at Cascade Bicycle Club here in Seattle, Washington. I use he, him pronouns, and I've been trying to understand my earliest cycling memory and what it says about me basically my entire life. So I was learning how to ride without training wheels, and my dad was there and some kids around the neighborhood. This is in East Texas, and I'm heading straight for a stop sign pole. And I remember distinctly having the thought, do I turn and avoid hitting the stop sign pole, even though I'm terrified of turning and eating it, or do I just brace for impact? And I chose to brace for impact. So that's my earliest cycling memory.
Thank you all so much for joining and for sharing a bit about yourselves. I loved hearing your earliest cycling memories. And so now we're going to jump into the presentations, where each panelist will have about 8 minutes to present. Friendly reminder to our audience members to please submit your questions using the Q&A function. After the presentations, we'll have plenty of time to answer your questions. And Kristin, take it away.
So I'm going to share a little bit about cycling education in Alexandria City Public Schools. We are located just outside of Washington, D.C. in one of the suburbs. And I have been with Alexandria City Public Schools. This will be my 24th year. This is a picture of one of our group rides. And this picture really kind of encompasses the start to our program at the elementary level and all the hard work. So this was after our first year of a pilot, and it just kind of shows the success from all of the efforts that you'll learn about as I speak. So some of the historical background for how our program began. We had biking softly at our secondary level through a program called Bike Smart Virginia. It was a training program for teachers, and our PE staff at the secondary level was trained in 2004. And we got some bikes through a grant process. I was actually teaching at one of our middle schools at the time. And then due to teacher turnover and just lack of training for staff and support, it was rarely ever taught. It was one of my favorite units, and I always taught it, but it wasn't consistently taught at our secondary level. So fast forward a few years, in 2009, I moved to the elementary level, and it was something I always missed teaching. So I reached out to our central office level at the time, and I just said, is there any way we can bring this to the elementary school? Like, I feel like there were so many beginners at the secondary level. They really need to learn sooner. And so it was with that vision that he and I worked together to pilot a program at the elementary school where I was teaching in 2016. Now, to make this happen, we had to bring a lot of community partners. We had to do a lot of fundraising just to purchase a bike fleet. So it was extremely successful. A lot of other schools learned about it, and we were slowly able to build the program in the future with the Safe Routes to School grant that was offered through the Virginia Department of Transportation. So we basically had that grant until 2023, when the funding was no longer available to us. But because of that funding, we were able to acquire an additional 10 bike fleets to be shared between our schools. So we in total have 17 schools. So that was how, truly that funding supported the growth. We also then modified the Virginia Bike Smart curriculum for the elementary level, and we're able to train all of our staff using that model. Returning after the pandemic, I took on my role as instructional specialist, so overseeing health and PE, and I desperately wanted to make this a requirement at our schools since so many were already teaching it. So I was able to do another full staff training and add this to our pacing guide so that it is included for all third graders across our district at some point during their PE units in the school year. And then it's also something that secondary needs to teach. They can choose their grade level, 6th, 7th, or 8th. And then it will be something our high school will be also required to offer. Our high school is currently under construction, so it's been on a little bit of a pause. Also, I was able to get a pedestrian and bike education support specialist who assists me with being hands-on support at our schools. So when they're doing biking, she works with the beginner riders and just logistics. She meets with them before and kind of talks through like where on their campus they can bike and what that might look like. And then we 2 years ago created a Bike Buddies volunteer program that also supports our cycling. So that's sort of just the history and the background to 2004 all the way to 20 years later. The rollout in our schools, I know I briefly touched on this, but again, you can kind of see that it started in 2004 with a few schools. That pilot was in 2016-17 school year. So 16, I piloted it. The next school year, we had 2 other schools try to do the same, but you can just see the growth. And again, we only have 17 schools total. So this, means that all of our schools are participating, which is huge. Our funding sources. So the biggest one came from our Safe Routes to School, that grant that was offered by our Virginia Department of Transportation. It's no longer available. Transurban, so one of our highways is off of 95 called 495 Express Lanes. They also offer mini grants. So I apply for those annually, and that it's a small amount, but it still can go a long way. So that currently supports our helmet purchases at our schools. Just also local grants. I'm constantly searching and trying to talk with different community partners about things that they might be offering or grants that they may know about. So that networking piece is really important. And then making those connections. So one of our local advisory committees, they donate money to us as a gift. So that also definitely helps, like making connections, joining their monthly meetings and letting them know what we're doing to support accessibility within our community. Excuse me, be it bikes or pedestrian, excuse me, access. And then they gift us each year a couple $1,000s to support the educational efforts we're doing in our schools. So that has been a huge help. And then just the bike shops. I feel like I've tried to, make very strong relationships with them, because often they'll lower the cost on bulk purchases, or they'll even like do some maintenance for free. So that has been a huge help with just that funding piece and the sustainability of our program. Grade level requirements, just to give you like a snapshot of like how our district does it. So of our 14 elementary schools, they must teach, we call it biking in the schools. We've coined it BITS. They must teach it at the 3rd grade level. And then they can optionally do it again in 4th and 5th grade if they want, and they have the bandwidth within their PE staff. We provide volunteer support for 3rd grade only, just based on our schedule. We have 4 middle schools, and they must also teach advanced biking in the schools to at least 1 dedicated grade level, so that at some point during their middle school time, all of our students will have experienced an additional biking unit. And then our high school campuses, PEs, they kind of do a different model of an activity, like a choice selection. So they'll say, okay, this unit we're teaching volleyball, biking, and ultimate frisbee, and students sign up for the sport activity of their interest. So biking must be offered each semester to our students. And then that expands, so they will do more off-campus riding and bike maintenance as part of that curriculum. So the curriculum is growing from elementary through high school. Program basics. At the elementary level, as I said, it's growing. So they're going to learn, we have a variety kind of abilities. We do some pre-assessments with them, and we loop them into either beginner, intermediate, or advanced groupings. And then they're challenged based on, their individual abilities within those groups, and they're fluid. If somebody's a beginner but masters pedaling and braking and turning, then they could move to the intermediate group. We teach a lot of trail and road riding skills, but we do it on the campus. And that's 4 to 6 lessons. At the secondary level, we call it advanced biking in the schools. And this, again, it reviews the basic like bike safety and riding skills that they should have learned at the elementary level. And then it really focuses on how to access their community through biking and practice these skills on a course created on their campus and during off-campus rides. Again, we recruit, volunteers for these off-campus rides and to work with our beginner riders there, but we aren't able to provide daily support like we are at the elementary level. Units are approximately 3 to 4 weeks long. Our schools rotate on a block schedule, so that would mean up to 10 biking lessons, right around 8 to 10. And then we do have a lot of inclusion, including our students with disabilities is a huge piece to our program. We want to make sure all students have access to it. So we have a lot of adapted bikes in our districts that we rotate from school to school just based on the student's needs. And we also then will get extra volunteer support to help with just that one-on-one assistance for those students as needed. Our Bike Buddies volunteer program that I mentioned earlier, this is more at the elementary level and then the middle school level as we can help. But the Bike Buddies, there's a little training video that they watch, and they do a little exit ticket to make sure, just to check for understanding of basics. And it essentially goes through like the language we're using during our lessons. So if we're gonna have them do the ABC quick check, what does that exactly stand for? When we talk about the helmet fitting, we wanna make sure they're using the same guidance with the students and that we are teaching them in the classroom. So we want to make sure they know that same language, and also how to help beginners without being too hands-on. That's a big piece, just with making sure we respect the boundary of a student and asking consent before touching them and all of that. So there's a training program that they do. They get there early. Sometimes they'll help take the bikes out of the storage location where they are. They help students with their bike helmets. doing their safety check before riding, and then they directly work with our beginner riders. And that has been a tremendous help to our program and the success. So there's more hands-on with those beginners. Number of students served, this is just from last school year, but we had over 1,000 students at the elementary level that participated in biking. We had just under 500 at the middle school. We had one middle school not participate due to, we had 3 of their teachers on maternity leave at the same time, and it was just unfortunately not possible. So this year we're hoping to make that up with those students that missed. And then our high school, again, is currently under construction, but it's opening this August. So hopefully this coming school year, we will be able to start biking again at our high school campus. Just a little bit of data. When we survey them, we have them do a post-survey after. And this is always my favorite part, but 96% of the students surveyed rated improved biking skills after the unit in PE. I mean, just that speaks to itself, just with that success. We had 74% feel that the ABC quick check and helmet check were important before riding. So many of our students, we see them coming to school without helmets. And so we really try to enforce, that safety piece with them. 43% surveyed felt that braking and quick stop was the easiest skill to perform. And then 51% felt that the hand signals were the hardest. And we certainly see that when we're teaching the elementary students to take that hand off to signal. And then overall, 71% of the students surveyed enjoyed the overall biking unit and would like to do it again. So the data always is kind of my favorite part at the end, just to measure their success. And that is the end of mine. I know that there was a few questions I saw in the chat, and I will definitely get to those at the end of our presentation when we open it up for Q&A.
All right, and we'll pass it to Travis next.
Thanks, Jamal. Let me share screen. Let me know, can you see that? All looks good. Perfect. So as a reminder, my name is Travis Counsell, Hawaii Bicycling League Executive Director. Our program is called BikeEd Hawaii. Actually, this past school year, we celebrated our 35th year of offering this program to Oahu, so one island in Hawaii, elementary schools. So just briefly, a quick overview of the Hawaii Bicycling League. We were founded in 1975, basically with the mission to get more people on bikes for health, recreation, and transportation. We do this in a variety of ways: advocacy efforts, big events, and then education, which I'll dive into in just a second. We do have 5 full-time office staff and then 7 seasonal education staff who help run BikeEd. So a little bit about BikeEd Hawaii, our history. It was actually started at a local charter school by a teacher there that wanted to see improved biking amongst students, and HBL adopted and expanded the program in 1989. In the 90s, we expanded it to a couple dozen schools and then had multiple teams in the early 2000s. And currently we reach over 100 schools and around 8,000 students every year. So that's almost all of the elementary schools on the island of Oahu. Overview of our curriculum. It is a 5-day in-school program, basically where we take a class, a 45 to 60-minute class, what would have been their either PE or some other portion of their 4th grade class, and do that 5 days throughout the week. So a number of our schools will have 3 or 4 classes at each school, or we'll do multiple schools each week. We do pre and post quizzes to kind of gauge their knowledge, and as Kristin mentioned, their appreciation of wearing a helmet and doing these safety checks, those types of things. The first day is focused on some classroom learning. We'll go over helmet fitting, some of the basics, the skills that we'll be doing later in the week. We do some hands-on on day 2 as far as the quick checks and some of the on-bike safety. And then day 3 and 4 are really focused on skill learning, which I'll go over on the next slide. And then we conclude the week, ideally, if the kids have passed all the skill tests, with an off-campus ride, either to a nearby park or through the local neighborhood, just to basically emphasize those skills, with the ultimate goal of the kids feeling more comfortable biking to school. Some of the skills we do, a lot of these are very similar to the LCI instructions, just kind of brought down to a 4th grade level with some added fun with monster trucks and stop signs and things like that. So We have a lot of fun with the fourth graders here, usually on a tennis court or the parking lot of the school. We also have an activity book. This is usually either homework or if it's a rainy day or something like that, with crossword puzzles, word search, and some signs and hand signal type of recognition. So a lot of fun there with the kids. There's also a coloring book component to this as well, where they have to point out all the mistakes. As I mentioned, we have 7 staff members on this program. We have a program manager who handles all the scheduling, the staffing, and the grant reimbursement requests. Then we have 2 different teams, these 2 box trucks, each with 2 full-time instructors and then a part-time instructor who helps on the Thursday, Fridays when we do those more either off-campus or extra hands-on stuff. And each of these trucks has 30 bikes, as well as helmets and safety vests and everything like that. So we bring everything to the school. Brief overview of last year. As I mentioned, it was our 35th school year doing this. We reached 104 elementary schools, kind of a combination of public, private, charter schools, variety of different schools there. Just over 7,000 students. Enrollment has been down a little bit in our schools, but we did see an increase in those quiz scores again. So these are the pre and post class where we test their knowledge of if they need to ride, where they need to ride on the road, if they should wear a helmet, those types of things. We actually, of those 7,000, we had about 1,200 students who didn't know how to ride a bike. So we usually split them into a smaller group and either have the teacher help or one of the instructors help teach them how to ride a bike. And we have a pretty good success rate there, especially over the course of those kind of 5 days of focusing on that. We also do other community events like bike rodeos or tabling events where we can engage families and youth outside of this program. So why Bike Ed? Where was this kind of founded? Hawaii does have a helmet law for under 16 years old, and a lot of this kind of comes from the safety aspect of wearing a helmet. There's also kind of an increased push for traffic safety or biking to school. And then in more recent years, aligns with our Safe Routes to School plans, as well as Complete Streets and Vision Zero. These 2 clippings here are actually from the city's Complete Streets and Vision Zero plans, where they outline the work that HBL has been doing to educate younger students. We also offer adult and senior education as well. But since 1989, we've had over 100,000 students go through this with some great kind of success stories. Several state senators, actually our current city's Safe Routes to School coordinator went through this program, and her daughter actually just went through the program this past year. So now we're seeing multi-generations going through this program, which is great. Some of the funding sources, I kind of hinted to the city supporting this. Originally, this was actually a kind of a pilot project through the DOE, but then was transitioned more over to the City Department of Transportation for at least the last 30 years. It's paid via the Bikeway Fund. Unlike a lot of other cities, we actually have a bike registration requirement. We are an island, so a little easier to manage bikes coming and going. But all of those registration, it's a one-time fee, go into a fund, which helps pay for not only the maintenance of bikeways, but also this education program, which is a part of a larger grant that we received to do other adult education as well. As you see, it's about a $235,000 program over the course of the year. The city covers the vast majority of that, but we do rely on some donations and other various grants. This photo on the bottom right is actually a local union who donated and helped build 60 new bicycles just 2 years ago. So completely overhauled the whole fleet, and they covered the cost and made a fun day of putting all the bikes together. We also, as Kristin mentioned, do rely a lot on our bike shops as well for not only help with some more serious repairs, but also with getting these bikes either at wholesale or some sort of discount, and then also supporting us in a variety of other ways. Bicycles and vehicles tend to be the places that the city grants won't really support. So we try to find other avenues to get those funds. As I mentioned, we do some bike rodeos, community events. Some of those do have a funding aspect to them. A bike rodeo is kind of like a bike obstacle course at a community fair or festival. Great opportunity to engage with parents. And we also do helmet giveaways and those things. We also sell helmets, very basic helmets are us helmets, as well as t-shirts. Over 1,000 a year that we sell basically at cost, just to increase the helmet usage and make sure kids have those helmets. But again, a vast majority comes from our city and county. So very thankful for that. Just wanted to mention some headwinds and tailwinds. I think, you'll hear a lot of people talk about staffing challenges. This is a seasonal program. It follows the school year. Even our full-time instructors are really more like 30 to 35 hours a week during the school year. So kind of a unique job, also a hard job. You're out in the sun and you're hanging out with fourth graders all day. So some of those can be challenging. It is reimbursement funding, so we do have to spend the money to then get the money reimbursed. And working with the city, it can take 6 months or more for reimbursements at times. So some of that is a challenge, but thankfully some advantages we have. As I mentioned, this is a 35-year-old program that's got a lot of legacy relationships and kind of momentum with it. We work directly with the teachers at all of these schools, so some of them have been around the whole time that we've been offering this program and know the exact week next year that they will be hosting Bike Ed. So thankfully, there's a lot of energy at that local level. I mentioned Chet the Jet. He's the gentleman with that yellow truck actually next to Katie Bourne. She was the original kind of program starter back in 1985. But Chet's been with us for 25 years teaching Bike Ed, so he's almost more famous than the program itself. Everybody knows Chet the Jet. And then a big shout out to Chris Sayers, the gentleman on the right there. He was one of our original Bike Ed instructors and actually went on to be the city's bicycle coordinator for the last 30 years. So he was a big supporter of this program. Other opportunities I see just as I look at this as a whole is really tying this to HBL in the broader sense, our advocacy efforts, those types of things. And then awareness. Like I said, 100,000 people have gone through this program and not all of them are aware that it's put on and managed by HBL. So I think we're working on connecting those. I also wanted to include some of these thank you cards. I'll have a few more of those in just a slide, but great to see when we get these in our office, the love that the fourth graders have for this program. Just some advice for folks looking to start this. Obviously, 35 years is, it's hard to replicate that in a year, but find a champion, ideally somebody that's got connections either at the school or maybe it's a parent or somebody that's willing to volunteer their time. I do say also know your value. A lot of times these are volunteer positions or not highly paid things, but you are providing a very strong value to the city or the county or the school system that you're providing this. Seek some seed funding. As Kristin mentioned, there's definitely grants out there from local organizations or foundations that might be interested in doing a one-time thing just to kind of proof of concept and then use that to align with some sort of government need. Most of our counties and states now have safe routes or complete streets or Vision Zero, that type of stuff, and kind of tap into some of that larger efforts. I put be part of a larger organization. I only put that because of largely the funding sources and the challenges that come with that. Being part of HBL that has a bigger mission makes this program be able to kind of weather some of the ups and downs. And then I include the thank you notes. So whenever you can get fourth graders or any of the school groups that you're working with to write some of these thank you letters, I'll include that a little bit more on this page as well. These go a long way. I think anytime you get a politician or somebody who might be questioning why $200,000 plus goes to this, when they start looking at the thank yous from students, it certainly helps out a lot. So with that, I just want to thank you and my contacts there. I'm of course happy to answer some of the questions. I saw those popping in, but we'll do that at the end. All right, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Travis. All right, we'll pass it to Angela.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'll share my screen here so you can see everything. Okay. Just go to the presentation here. So, hi, everyone. I'm Angela Olson, she, her. I'm the Deputy Director at the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. I'll just briefly tell you a little bit about our organization. We have just celebrated our 15th year in January, so we've been around for 15 years. We're really just a place trying to make Minnesota a safe and fun place to bike, walk, and roll. So we're here to do two main things. We do education and advocacy. So we do a lot of teaching, providing education resources, and then a lot of legislative advocacy at the state level and also on the local level. So at BikeMN, we have a couple different education programs. I'm here to talk about our school training program, but real quick, I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the other stuff we have going on. So we do have an adult learn to ride program that that we're entering into our third summer. Last year, we gave away over 400 bikes and educated over 500 people to learn how to ride a bike for the first time. And those are all adults over 16. So that program is funded through our MPO, the Metropolitan Council, and it's a regional grant, but we recently just got some state funding to pilot this program in northern Minnesota, so near the Red Lake Indigenous Reservation, and also Duluth, which is on the shoreline of Lake Superior. We also have a people-friendly driver program. As you can probably imagine, this is our least popular, least requested program, but it's a people-friendly driver, just talking about how to share the roads with vulnerable road users. We do this in schools as well occasionally. So I'll talk a little bit more about the legislative impact that this last year has had on driver's ed, but it's a kind of a best practices for being a people-friendly driver, not that dissimilar from what the league has put out. And then Walk Bike Fun. This is our statewide curriculum education program. So we have a curriculum designed for grades K through 8. The newest version was probably one of the first things I worked on when I started here. So end of 2022, beginning of 2023, we redid the curriculum. It's really robust now. So we got it divided by age levels, K through 2, 3 to 5, and then 6 to 8. So this has biking and pedestrian lessons and an adaptive toolkit. All of the lessons that we've created in this curriculum meet or exceed Minnesota benchmarks and standards for physical education. So every single lesson meets those benchmarks and standards. They're between 30 and 45 minutes. They're meant to go in order, especially on the biking side. Originally, our curriculum started at 4th grade with the assumption that 4th graders know how to ride bicycles, and that assumption was wrong. So now we start at the very beginning with learning to ride, all the way up to handling skills like a rock dodge, avoidance weave, things like that. So our curriculum training program has 2 parts. One part is an online training module that takes about 2 hours that teachers can do on their own time asynchronously. They don't even have to take an in-person training. They can just take that if they are interested or want to learn more about it. It was actually created in response to COVID-19, but it was an asset that we ended up putting a lot of effort into, and is become a lot more practical and usable. And then the second part is an in-person training. So at BikeMN, we have 6 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. 4 of us are educators. So it's myself, and then there are 3 educators that work between all these different programs. So in the part 2 training, somebody from our organization will come out and we will go through the curriculum together. It's really hands-on, so teachers get the opportunity to actually practice the lessons. And then we take them on a bike ride. We take them around their community, showing them the different types of infrastructure that their students might have to come across when they are trying to bike, walk, or roll to school. Really quickly, I can show you an infographic here. Oh, here's our curriculum. So it's pretty long. It also includes an adaptive toolkit. So every lesson has some type of adaptive call out. Here's something on personal safety. But there's usually some type of activity modifications suggested in there, as well as an adaptive toolkit in the back of the book, talking about how to work with disabled students. And then here's just a little infographic I wanted to share with you all on some of the kind of data on the programming. So far we've trained over 1,000 educators. This program started in 2008 or 9, but we've really, and as you can imagine, there was a really big dip in participation during kind of the COVID pause, but we've really ramped up our programming. So on average, we guess that we reach about 100,000 students every year, which is about 40% of students across the state, elementary students across the state of Minnesota. And here's a little bit of a just a map to kind of see where we've been across our state. All right, back to my slideshow. This program is funded through our Minnesota Department of Transportation. The funding source is the Safe Routes to School source of funding. It alternates every 2 years between the federal pool of funding and the state pool of funding. And every year, our Department of Transportation puts out an RFP to continue this education curriculum training program. And so far, knock on wood, we've been the recipients of that for now 4 or 5 years in a row. It's a reimbursement-based program, so we get the funding. It's 2 years worth of funding. What we've written into there to cover is not only our time, but also our technical assistance. So once educators have participated in the training program, their schools have access to our technical assistance, including hands-on coaching, phone coaching. We'll come on bike rides with students. We love doing that. Maintenance training, as well as access to our fleets. So we have 3 fleets of 2-wheel bikes that we program all across the state. We use a logistics company that ships them. We try to schedule things about 2 weeks at a time. So a school will have that for 2 weeks at a time. In Minnesota, you can imagine that the winter months our fleets don't get used very often. They do occasionally. May is typically the kind of biggest time that people want to participate. So we try to work with schools in that way. And then we have an adaptive library of, I think we're at 13 different adaptive bikes that we program kind of based on need. The curriculum training program, also, we have a couple other trainings that kind of fit under this umbrella, including a maintenance training. So we can train our educators on how to maintain their bike fleets. A lot of our partner schools will get a boost grant through our Department of Transportation to purchase a fleet of bikes for their students. And so we oftentimes will kind of teach them how to maintain them. And then something else called the Ambassador Program. The Ambassador Program kind of came from identifying the need of more informal education spaces. So after school, community ed, even just interested volunteers and parents who want to put on, for example, a bike rodeo at their block party. We can train people to do that and give them the supplies that they need, like spray chalk and cones, to kind of put those things on. One really exciting thing legislatively that happened in the 2022 and 2023 legislative session is that Minnesota passed a law that schools are now required to teach pedestrian and bicycle safety education in all schools. So before that, the policy said schools may teach bicycling and pedestrian education. Now all schools must. And there are different requirements for grades K through 4 and 4 through 8. So we wrote this as part of an omnibus bill that was included at the legislative season last year. And then this year we updated some of that language to include information about e-bike usage. Minnesota has the legal age limit of 15 in order to operate an e-bike. So our curriculum now, we must let students know that they are not allowed to ride an e-bike until they're 15. What worked in this process, it was kind of we kind of had a unicorn of a year in Minnesota. We had a Democratic House, Senate, and executive branch, and we also had a $16 billion state surplus. This year we don't, but last year we did. We had a lot of long-term relationships that we had built up with our transportation committee chairs, as well as kind of capitalized on the fact that there were already existing parameters for bus safety education that are required in Minnesota. So when I was a kid, we had to like hop on the bus, learn where the emergency exit is, and we had to like jump out and land on a mat. And then we have our existing curriculum training program, which is Walk Bike Fun. So we really pointed to that as a tool that schools across the state could use. So we created a landing page, which I'll share with y'all, for educators to utilize our existing resources from curriculums and other sources. So this isn't meant to replace our training program. We still encourage educators to do this, but if they can't, if their school doesn't have the resources or time, in order to meet these requirements, we've come up with some shorter materials that they can use. We've hosted virtual office hours to offer support to educators across the state, especially right before school started. And then we have facilitated an informational webinar that's recorded on that webpage with the resources available. And I think that's about everything I needed to share. The one thing that I forgot to mention is our Walk Bike Fun training for teachers does include pay for subs. So we'll pay for the cost of a sub to the district. If it's a training session that happens, for example, during the summer, we'll pay the teachers a stipend directly. And then we've been working with our Department of Education. So now all teachers get 8 continuing education units for completing our program. But it's not just for teachers. It was designed with physical education teachers in mind. However, our classes are really successful when school administrators, safe routes to school coordinators, who are really invaluable partners of ours, even law enforcement or safety, school safety resource officers, and volunteers in the community coming together to learn about how to teach biking and pedestrian safety to our youth. And I have a whole slew of links I'll pop in the chat so that you can take a look at some of those things that I mentioned. And I look forward to checking out your questions.
Thank you, Angela. All right, Stephen.
Alrighty, let me get to presenting here. Okay. Slideshow mode. Okay, guys. Again, Stephen Rowley, Education Director, Cascade Bicycle Club. We're located in Seattle, Washington. We've been around since about 1970. We do big rides and events like the Seattle to Portland ride. We do advocacy, including Washington Bikes, which is technically a separate entity, which is a C4. Cascade Bicycle Club is a 501c3. And then we do our education work, which is what I'll be spending the majority of my time on today. What I'm going to be talking about is a huge investment at the state level in bicycling education for youth. So our state legislation drafted and signed a bill into law that's called Move Ahead Washington that invests roughly $116 million in statewide bike safety education over around 15 years. We were incorporated at the very ground floor of this effort by the state. And the programs that are identified and described in the legislation itself are largely based on internal programs that we've been running, which we call Let's Go and the Major Taylor Project. So I'm going to give a little brief rundown of Let's Go. It's not going to differ a lot from what you've heard from other presenters so far. So it's 3rd through 8th grade, started off 3rd through 5th. It's an in-class bicycle and pedestrian safety curriculum. The 3rd through 5th is about 5 lesson modules, roughly 30 bikes per school fleet. Those 30 bikes fit in one of those trailers. That trailer goes to a school for about 3 weeks. In addition to that, we provide training to the PE teachers, and we handle all the delivery and logistics and maintenance in-house. And we also have adaptive equipment and supports through a strategic partnership with Outdoors for All, which is a regional nonprofit that focuses on equity and access for people of all ages that have special needs. Cool. So just by the numbers, so we internally were in Seattle and Edmond School District before this legislation passed. We were in about 106 schools. We served around 24,000 students every year, and it required roughly 700 bikes, 13 trailers, 3 vans to do all of that work. At any given time, we can have around 12 to 13 bike fleets out at schools. Great. So this is Major Taylor Project. So returning back to the legislative language and the programs that it identified, Major Taylor Project is Cascade's after-school bicycling initiative named after Major Taylor. And we really highlight and really focus in on schools and communities that have historically been marginalized. So we're very strategic in schools that we create partnerships with. So this model, the after school model, roughly 15 to 20 students maximum per club. Club is once per week after school. And then depending on the number of students, we arrive at our ideal volunteer and staffing mix. Completely free program. It has been funded through basically the general operating budget of Cascade Bicycle Club, plus a mix of fundraising and grants. Great, and you'll see our calendar on the right there. That's the typical flow of a season at a school. From fall club to what we call build a bike, where you're working on building a bike that you will get to keep, to spring club to event rides. And event rides include the Seattle to Portland ride, where we've had up to 35, 40 students ride to Portland. Okay, cool. So let's return now. So those programs were the basis for this legislation, or what was described. But I want to talk now again at the bigger scope here around the state. So the way this worked was CBC has an entire policy and advocacy wing, including a lobbyist that we have invested in for many years. We had Democratic Washington State transportation chairs that wanted to make a big splash in youth bicycling education. In particular, they really wanted to distribute bikes directly to youth. And so they asked, how could this work? How can we do this? And we said, well, we don't want to just give bikes to youth. We also want to teach them how to use those bikes safely. And so we sketched out this potential program that could be incorporated into the legislation. Great. So now this is kind of the ecosystem that we're in here. This is how it all works. So the Washington State Legislature has passed and been signed by the governor the Climate Commitment Act and the HEAL Act. The Climate Commitment Act is essentially a cap and invest program, and that's the main funding source of Move Ahead Washington, which is a transportation spending package. If you continue to follow down the line, so Move Ahead Washington funds a series of programs and initiatives. Our bike education program is just one piece of that. Within bike education, we have an in-class portion, which is Let's Go, or modeling after Let's Go, what we call youth development, which is modeling after MTP, and then Earn a Bike. So through in-class, we foster strategic partnerships. These are funding relationships with large school districts and something called the Association of Educational Service Districts. That's the AESD. Educational service districts are essentially large geographical bundles of school districts, and they're really strategic in reaching rural districts in the state of Washington. Youth development fosters partnerships with community-based organizations that can be a parks organization, it can be another bicycling nonprofit, what have you. And then it breaks out. In class serves 3rd through 8th, out of school serves 6th through 12th. And ideally, there is an Earn a Bike component that flows to all students that participate in either program. That's my timer. I know we're running short on time. I will try to be brief here. So this is a little bit about how we're thinking about the planning and execution of all of this. We wrapped our pilot phase last month, July 1st through June 30th, July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. And so we're looking to really expand in this next phase. This is our team. This team is dedicated to building partnerships and sending funding out the door to partners, as well as training and providing that ongoing support. Here's a flow chart that shows the different school districts that and partners that we've been able to partner with in the past year. So this is from July of 2023 through June of 2024. I will show you guys a table that wraps all this up a little bit more cleanly. These are just some GIS maps of our reach so far. It's been really important in the pilot year to try to reach across the state, which we've effectively done everywhere from Tacoma to Spokane, to really show the breadth of the program, demonstrate that to the political entity, and really try to advocate for its continued investment. Great. So year one is this year that we just wrapped in June of 2024. And now we're looking to year two, which is starting imminently. This is our forecasted growth, number of in-class partnerships, number of youth development partnerships, the budget for that, the estimated students served. We're forecasting pretty accelerated growth, and we think that's really necessary to try to reach as many students as we can in the 15 years we have. Great. So reimbursement was mentioned earlier, huge hardship for us, very difficult, especially on our youth development partners. Our small nonprofits really struggle with cash flow. We're working on solutions to that through, in particular, by trying to switch from quarterly to monthly reimbursement, and really continuously advocating and echoing this concern with WashDOT, that's our state Department of Transportation. Great. And then I wanted to highlight the political threat. So since this has been passed, there is now a political threat. Initiative 2117 is on the ballot this year, which would repeal the Climate Commitment Act, which is the funding mechanism for this project right now. We're working with a coalition of interest groups to protect the CCA. It's important to note that I-2117 does not repeal Move Ahead Washington. So the transportation package remains. What is lost is this large body of funding. We've been told that even if CCA is repealed, this is still the law. There will still be a statewide bike education program, but it will most likely dampen the scope of that significantly. Great. And I want to thank everyone for their time. Little snapshot, hundreds of students and one of our ESDs receiving bikes through the statewide bike education program.
Right. That was amazing. Thank you all so much for such thoughtful presentations and just the great work y'all are doing in schools. We went a little bit over, so we don't have as long for the audience Q&A, but we do have some time. But with that, I think I'm going to bundle some questions together and kind of get some thoughts from y'all. Can you just kind of elaborate for folks a little bit around, if you were going to start up a program, like what funding sources would you be looking at? Like what are some of those first steps you would take? Maybe community partnerships, school partnerships. So yeah, like if you were going, what advice would basically you give to someone starting up a program for those first steps?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think first it's important just to know like how much you're looking at. So getting some quotes from some of your local bike shops and seeing what they would be able to provide in regard to a fleet, determining the size that you would want for it. Our fleets are roughly 30 to 40 bikes and then helmets. So for us, that would be like $45,000, you know, just approximately. And again, bike cost varies from state to state. So I think that's helpful to always know. That was something I did first so that I knew what I was looking at. And then I connected with, if you're with the school district, to connect with the PTAs that are at the school, or if it's one specific school. That was really helpful for me to get buy-in from the administrators and just the parent organizations so that they could help. If they had any upcoming fundraisers, that they could add my project to the list. And then once I kind of knew what I was looking at and my vision, I created a one-pager that I honestly shared with local businesses, and the funding was going directly to the school. So there was like a way for them to actually donate, and then it was being set aside, like earmarked for that program. So that was one. I think you have to start, you know, with the vision and really know like the logistics there. And people always ask like, where are the bikes going to be stored? Where are they going to be riding on the campus? Like just knowing all of that for that initial like pilot is really beneficial. I think you get asked questions you aren't normally prepared to answer. You're like, oh, I'll figure that out. But like, honestly, when people are donating, sometimes they have very direct, specific questions. So just really having your plan kind of set and not doing it alone, like having a team of people to help you was really helpful for me. And so I had, you know, obviously people on the school side, but also people on the community side. I worked with our transportation environmental services, you know, TNES on their Vision Zero and Safe Street. All of that was, I also would constantly reference like safe routes to school or any state legislation around accessibility, and walkability within your community, I think that also can help with the, just your ask.
I would also say what's been really useful for us is getting in front of the people, like not only relying on teachers. So for us, we try to get in front of the district coordinator who is in charge of the professional development for the teachers to kind of like pitch, because a lot of people hear biking and pedestrian education and don't automatically make the connection between benchmarks and standards. And then also a lot of, I don't know, I've had great luck with our MPO as well. I think MPOs could be a really good place to start. And the final thing I'll say is those personal relationships have been invaluable. I think they're a hard practice to maintain in any industry, because if you leave an organization, sometimes your relationship goes with you. But having those relationships has really helped us learn about opportunities we might not have known about in terms of funding.
Yeah, I want to echo building alliance with school administration in our experience is key to the long-term success and potential scalability of the program. It's absolutely key for us to have the head of PE instruction. I forget what her title is. It changes constantly, but her role at Seattle Public Schools is absolutely vital for the long-term success of Let's Go at Seattle Public Schools. And the same for Edmond School District. School districts where we don't have that support, it's a lot harder to maintain a level of operations, and we've seen programs fizzle out with that. When you go school by school, it has a much greater likelihood of fizzling out.
Yeah, and I would just wrap up and say build the program that works for you. You can't do every program, and if you find that your school really wants 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, whatever fits into their calendar, start there, and kind of build what you can get support for, and then grow it if you can, and then reach out to the people on this call, or I assure you there's plenty of people doing something like what you want to create, and that can help you. You don't have to create everything from scratch.
Can I add one more thing that might be helpful? If you look at the All Kids Bike program, we do use that Balance Bike program for our kinder and first. It's a whole package deal, and they have like fundraising tips, and you can do it small with just one school. And that may be like a great place to look to start something that's like the curriculum's already there for you. I mean, it's just all packaged beautifully for a rollout in a school and to fundraise at one specific school. So just putting in a plug for their program.
I was also going to say our Walk Bike Fun curriculum is free. Anybody can download and use it in their school. You don't have to, I mean, I can't guarantee it's going to be the standards and benchmarks of other states, but I can't imagine they're that different than Minnesota for physical education. And if anyone wants help with it, I'm always happy to talk shop. So anybody can use it. It's there and it's free. And we also have our ambassador program, which does some similar things, talks about how to start up bike education in your community. So any of that is available for free as well.
Well, thank you all so much for all of your insights and just sharing with us today, taking the time. Thank you to our audience for showing up and being able to learn from y'all. And so that's all the time we have. But the slides, resources, and contact information for our panelists will be available on the website shortly, as well as the recording for this webinar. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Be on the lookout for more information on the League's campaign to ensure every child gains the skills to experience the joy and freedom of cycling. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful rest of your day.